The moment that changed. Everything didn't start with yelling, or tears, or some dramatic announcement. It started with silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your chest feel tight. I was standing in the middle of my cousin's engagement party, holding a cheap plastic cup of soda, while my aunt laughed loudly and said, "Well, at least we know she didn't amount to much. Someone has to be the family nobody, right?" Everyone around her chuckled awkwardly, and I felt my face burn. I had spent my whole life being treated like I was invisible, like I was a disappointment, like I was nothing. But what happened next was something none of them saw coming. Because right after she said that, the front door opened. A man in a crisp pilot's uniform walked in, looked straight at me, and stood at full attention. And that was the exact moment my entire family realized they had been wrong about me this whole time. Tell me honestly, if you were in my place, would you have finally spoken up? Or would you have let the truth hit them all at once the way I did? I guess to understand why that moment mattered so much, you need to know who I was in my family before that day. I was the youngest on my mom's side, the quiet one, the one who never bragged, never showed off, never posted flashy things online. My cousins were all loud, confident, and constantly competing. One was a lawyer, another was running a startup my uncle kept investing in, another married rich and made sure everyone knew it. And then there was me, the girl who worked some random job, who didn't talk much at family gatherings, who always showed up alone. They decided a long time ago that I was the failure. No one ever actually asked me what I did for a living. They just assumed it wasn't worth knowing. Growing up, the comparison started early. At every birthday, every Eid dinner, every wedding, there were comments. Your cousin got top marks. Again. Your cousin already has a car. Your cousin's husband just bought them a house. And then they'd look at me with that same tight smile and say, "And you're still figuring things out, huh?" My mom would squeeze my hand under the table, but she never really defended me. She hated confrontation, and honestly, so did I. So I learned to smile, nod, and keep my head down. I told myself their opinions didn't matter. But that doesn't mean they didn't hurt. After college, things got worse. I didn't go the traditional route everyone expected. I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer or marry someone impressive. I moved away for training. I worked long hours. I missed family events. And because I wasn't around, the assumptions grew. I heard through the grapevine that my aunt once said, she probably couldn't handle real pressure. Another time, my cousin joked that I'd probably end up depending on my parents forever. What they didn't know was that I was building something quietly, something that took discipline, sacrifice, and an insane amount of hard work, but I kept it to myself. Partly because I didn't want to jinx it, and partly because I was tired of trying to prove myself to people who had already made up their minds. The engagement party was supposed to be simple. My cousin was marrying into a wealthy family, and this was her moment to shine. The hall was decorated with gold and white. There was a huge dessert table, and a photographer following her around like she was a celebrity. I almost didn't go. I knew how these things usually went for me. Side comments, fake smiles, questions that were really insults. But my mom asked me to come, and I didn't want to disappoint her. So I put on a simple dress, did my makeup, and showed up alone, just like always. From the second I walked in, I felt it. The looks. The whispers. One of my cousins looked me up and down and said, "Oh, that's cute. Very simple." Another asked, "So are you still working that job?" She actually made air quotes with her fingers. I just smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm still working." That seemed to satisfy them. In their minds, I was still the same nobody they'd always known. Then came my aunt, the same one who had always been the loudest critic. She had a glass of juice in her hand and that smug expression on her face. She started talking about how proud she was of her daughter, how successful their family was becoming, how everyone was doing so well. Then she glanced at me and laughed. That's when she said it, that line about me being the family nobody. And the worst part wasn't just her words, it was the way everyone else reacted. No one defended me. No one said she was out of line. Some people laughed. Others looked away, and in that moment, I felt about 2 inches tall. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to leave. I remember thinking, why do I keep doing this to myself? Why do I keep showing up where I'm clearly not wanted or respected? My hands were shaking and I was staring at the floor trying to breathe. That's when I heard the door open behind me. At first I didn't think anything of it. People were coming and going all night. But then I heard a shift in the room. The chatter quieted a little. Someone whispered, "Who's that?" I turned around slowly, and that's when I saw him. Tall, confident, wearing a pilot's uniform so sharp it looked like it had been ironed twice. The insignia on his shoulders caught the light. He scanned the room for a second, and then his eyes locked onto mine. My heart stopped, because I knew him, and more importantly, he knew me. He walked straight toward me, ignoring everyone else. I could feel all the eyes on us. When he reached me, he stopped, straightened his posture, and stood at full attention, right there, in the middle of the hall. His voice was calm, clear, and loud enough for everyone to hear when he said my name and greeted me respectfully. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't flashy. It was professional, and it was powerful. You could have heard a pin drop. My aunt's smile froze on her face. My cousins' mouths were literally hanging open. Someone dropped a spoon. I felt like I was in a dream. The man my family had never bothered to ask about, the life they never cared to understand, was suddenly standing, in front of all of them in undeniable proof that I was not who they thought I was. He relaxed and smiled at me, asking how I was, apologizing for being late. I smiled back, my hands still shaking, and said it was fine. He turned slightly and addressed the room politely, introducing himself and explaining his connection to me. He didn't brag. He didn't put anyone down. He just stated facts. And somehow, that was enough to completely shatter the image my family had built of me for years. This is the part where I want to pause and talk directly to you. Because up until that moment, I had a choice. I could have brushed it off, changed the subject, protected their egos like I always did, or I could finally let the truth be seen. So before I tell you what happened next, I want you to think about it. If you had been treated like nothing your entire life by the people who were supposed to support you, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed silent one more time? The tension in the room was unreal. My aunt tried to laugh it off, saying something like, "Oh, how impressive." But her voice was tight. One of my cousins immediately started asking questions. Where did we meet? How long had I been doing this? Why didn't anyone know? And that's when I finally found my voice. Not loud, not angry, just calm. I told them I didn't feel the need to explain my life to people who never bothered to ask. I said I worked hard, that I chose a path that required sacrifice, and that I kept it private because it was mine. You could see the realization dawning on their faces. All those years they'd spent judging me, mocking me, looking down on me, and they hadn't known a single real thing about my life. My aunt went quiet. Really quiet. She avoided my eyes. Later, she tried to pull me aside and say she didn't mean it like that she was just joking. I looked at her and said, "Jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone." I wasn't rude. I wasn't cruel, but I was done pretending. The rest of the night felt surreal. People who had barely spoken to me before suddenly wanted to talk. Compliments, curiosity, forced smiles. But here's the thing. Their attention didn't feel as good as I thought it would. What felt good was standing there, knowing I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my life quietly, honestly, and with integrity, and no amount of late respect could change the past. In the weeks after, the family dynamic shifted. Some people genuinely apologized. Others stayed distant. My aunt never really admitted she was wrong, but she never made another comment like that again. And me? I walked away from that night lighter than I'd ever felt. Not because I proved them wrong, but because I finally stopped caring if they thought I was a nobody. So here's what I learned. People will label you based on how loud you are, how visible your success is, how well you fit their expectations. But the most powerful growth happens in silence. And sometimes the best response isn't arguing back. It's letting your life speak for itself. If you were on my side in this story, go ahead and like this video. If you want to hear more real, messy, unbelievable stories like this, make sure you subscribe. And I really want to know what you think. So share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.